Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing, sir?
Hi, I'm the other guy and the stack of comics. I'm doing good. How about you, Reed?
Doing all right. Here to talk a topic we've talked a little bit before. We've probably done a video similar to this, but I think in 2025 with where they're at, always good to just kind of go over where we think the X-Men are, and get people's opinions too. I think a huge part for this is just seeing what do people think as well. And what we want to talk about is the X-Men, I think, without a doubt, are kind of a broken brand at this point. At least on the comic book front. I think you can say X-Men 97's doing okay. Cinematically, Wolverine and Deadpool made quite a bit of money, and we'll see where they take them down the line. But from the comic standpoint, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with X-Men. You have this recent event where they retconned Kamala Khan into some of the events. Now, some are saying that's alternate timeline, and some remember it and so don't. Regardless, you took classic X-Men events and you rewrote them to put a new character who just became a mutant into it. I think we can talk the fact that there are so many books. They're so expensive. The characters just seem to be all over the place. And that's kind of going through like Krakoa too, where we saw the mutants do a lot of things. So, Mike, what I thought we would do is just talk a little bit about why we think the X-Men brand got broken, what we would do to try to fix it. And I think there are going to be some folks who go, nope, can't fix it. It's done. It's over. They're broken. We're going to take it as it's our job. Like if we were hired to fix this, where it's like you can't say it's just nothing. So, Mike, I'll kick it to you. You are a longtime X-Men fan. You dropped the books a long time ago. Um, I was a lifelong X-Men fan. I stopped reading during Krakoa, tried again and from the ashes, and then stopped again. But I'll kick it to you to start. What broke the X-Men for you, and where do you think they're at right now?
The main thing, and you really can't get away from this. And the main thing for me was the main team was split apart to support the other comics. So, you know, and I've talked with other X-Men fans, friends of ours, who have tried to chase down every book so they could get the thing. I wasn't one of those. I was your tertiary X-Men fan who liked to buy the main book many, many years ago. And and that just it broke down. And for a while, I think it worked because you could put Gambit in this book and Storm in that book, and then you could have three books now selling really well. And I think for a while that worked, but then it kind of broke down, and you can kind of see how it kind of broke down to where there isn't really a standout book anymore. But for me, it was for breaking up the team. That's the core of my whole thing because man, that's a strong team. That was a great team and it made it fun. And we got used to knowing all their personalities and everything and how they interacted and how they conflicted and how it worked. And then, after I stopped reading it, I guess it went down some really weird avenues. And then I was watching the X-Men 97 cartoon with my son, and all of a sudden people are palsing around with Magneto like he's part of. I was like, what happened? What
Yeah,
happened? Magneto cannot be, he can't he Magneto can't be part of that. Yes, he's the opposite of Xavier.
yeah. I think the thing is, you touched on a few things. I think for me as a fan who bought it most of my life and stopped buying 3 or 4 years ago, like you said, the teams broke down too much to where you weren't getting the dynamics the way that you wanted them to be anymore. And you don't need to rehash the same 20, hey, the X-Men play softball together kind of things. But there's a difference between having the same plot over and over and just not giving you what you want. And the bottom line is when you have Cyclops, when you have Storm, when you have Jean, when you have Wolverine, you have Nightcrawler, Colossus, Gambit, Rogue, all these identifiable A-list mutants, and you decide, hey, instead of one book or two books or three books, let's do 16. Let's do 19 books. Let's have Wolverine's a solo book and Storm's a solo book and Jean's a solo book and four different teams. it gets to where you're not seeing the dynamics anymore. And I think as DC Comics fans, you and I can see a similar thing in that Justice League doesn't work if you take Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman away. It just doesn't work as well. Could you make it work for a little bit? Sure. But that's the heart of the team. That's the heart of what makes the Justice League. And arguably, you can say Flash and Green Lantern are in there too. And so I think the thing with X-Men is, yeah, they spread way too thin. I think this touches on another part is because the books are so thinly spread out, even if you did love all of the books, the price of comics anymore. This is not a 199 thing or a $2 thing anymore. You're talking 4.99, 5.99, 6.99 for these books. Who's going to spend $100 to $125 picking up the X-Men line? And I think the problem is, while you can say, hey, well, we want a book for everybody's tastes, that's a great plot and plan, except for the fact that you keep doing crossovers over and over and over that feature all of these books. So you deplete the dynamics that make the teams work. You spread it too thin. It costs too much. You cross over all the time. Where, hey, here's the 8-part Hunt for Charles Xavier comic book that takes part in 7 books you're not reading. It just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that's a huge piece of it, and I would agree with you there. The other part you touched on is the Magneto piece of things and making Magneto one of the allies. And look, there has been times where Magneto's teamed up with the X-Men. That's not a recent phenomenon that was done in the 90s. However, it's gone on way too long, and Magneto's place amongst the X-Men. You also have Krakoa where Apocalypse was hanging out with them, Mr. Sinister. You had the Avengers going to Mystique's wedding and stuff like that. Like it just got too much where the X-Men got convoluted. And I think the thing is the X-Men used to be the most admirable characters in all of comic books. They were superheroes that the public hated. And so, unlike the Fantastic Four who sacrifice and save the day, but everyone loves them, these folks go save the day and everyone wants to kill them after it's over. And I think what happened is this is where that conflation of the real world and comic books got too much for X-Men. And look, there's always social themes in X-Men. There always will be. There always should be. I think sometimes it's inflated too much. But the difference is people got to point, well, how much are the mutants supposed to take? Well, I don't know. It's a comic book. The whole plot is not a real person experiencing this. It's a theme of people who are heroic and are saving people who don't like them because it's the right thing to do, not because they want to get even or we need to be respected or anything like that. They simply do the right thing because it's the right thing. And I think, like you pointed out, once you're watching and they're just hanging out with Magneto, a guy who, by the way, tried to kill all of them like on a weekly basis when they were teenagers, it sort of ruins the dynamics, especially because within the team, and Mike, this is the part that always bugged me. Wolverine was always my favorite character in the X-Men. But the cool thing with his dynamic is he was different. And the rest of the mutants really didn't like him at times because he would go that extra distance. Wolverine would kill or be too brutal. And so there you'd have those dynamics of Cyclops and Storm don't love that Logan does that kind of stuff. Once they're
Right.
palling around with Magneto, who's killed thousands of people and dropped skyscrapers, yeah, I don't want you guys giving Logan crap whatsoever for anything.
I
I
know,
think
right?
they ruined the dynamics too much. And I think, Mike, you pointed this out in a video we've done. The destruction of Charles Xavier has probably been the biggest thing, too, in that they really took him down as a character. What do you think taking Xavier kind of out of the X-Men and instead of being this beloved mentor kind of figure, turning him into this shady guy, what do you think the impact on X-Men for that was?
It's so wrong. It's so wrong. That team was invented perfectly by a couple of geniuses that thought up that dynamic, 60 years ago. And the reason it worked is because it's genius and it works good because you have Xavier there to be the conscience of the group and to be the father figure and help guide. It's so important in the structure of a story to have that mentor to kind of go to
Mm-hmm.
and for them to bounce ideas off of and learn and grow. Teachable moments, which is such a good part of the X-Men, storylines, is these teachable moments. And even for Xavier,
Yeah.
There are really poignant times where Xavier had to learn a powerful lesson from his team. And it's just so important because that makes it extra special when the mentor has to learn, something from the student. That's really powerful. But yeah, I don't like that they've marginalized Xavier and then given Magneto prominence. But that you know, maybe they'll write it to where it was all backwards world, bizarro X-Men world, and it was really, I don't know. You
No,
never
there
know with
definitely
comics.
be
That's the
ways to
beauty
make
of it.
Xavier's corruption fixable. And I think that's the thing is Xavier becoming there's a difference between Xavier has moments where he's not as idealistic as you think, or Xavier may do something you wouldn't have expected him to do. There's a difference between that and Xavier is a freaking psychopath. And that's where they kind of went down the distinction. They did the same thing to Beast too, where it's like, look, you can draw Xavier as a flawed man who's not perfect, but he should be this benevolent mentor who opened a school to help mutants to help them learn to deal with their gifts. They got obsessed with this Magneto is right. It's time for the mutants to strike. And the whole thing with the Magneto is right thing that some fans got behind and that some writers certainly got behind is basically what you're teaching is return ugly for ugly. You treat people the way you've been treated kind of thing. And it's like that's we literally teach kid the golden rule kind of thing. And superheroes to me that's I think the X-Men started getting too much written for adults in terms of at the end of the day when Stan and Jack and I think Chris Claremont to the same extent wrote these characters they had the understanding that look these are yes great characters it's a great story but ostensibly these are role models for kids these are fables for kids to read to learn lessons of and hey don't treat people because they're different that's why you like the X-Men and you shouldn't treat people in the real world that way and if you do get treated poorly by others, you still do the right thing. Instead, the X-Men kind of became this no, screw you. You didn't treat me well. I'll use my laser beams to blow you up. And I think there's no
And
better
it's
example of that than what happened with Krakoa, where you had them kind of create their own little island nation, become isolationists. They created a cure for cancer that they didn't share with the world. They, defeated death. And once they started doing all these things, and then they turned all of them into murderers. I mean, you had Polaris and Nightcrawler and Colossus and Kitty Pryde just wiping people out by the dozen and cracking wise while doing it. And it's like, that's the destruction I think that took place with the X-Men. It's not a Kamala Khan thing or the new characters sucked kind of thing. It was literally, I think you had writers who no longer wanted to write these characters as the audience wanted them to be. And I think that's why you've seen the X-Men lose prominence to where Uncanny X-Men ain't the top selling book of comic books anymore. It's really not even close, and it should be. It should be one of the books that's up near the top. And really, outside of a number one, they have to keep rebooting and renumbering and rebooting and renumbering, which Marvel and DC don't do that unless the sales are bad. Any series that's selling well, they don't reboot and renumber all that often. And so I think that's where it kind of went wrong we've sort of pivot, Mike. I mean, we've seen characters go crazy. We've seen them take actions that just are hard to redeem. But if I put you in charge and said, Mike, it is your job now. You gotta everything that's happened, you gotta deal with it. How do you fix the X-Men in your opinion?
I think, for old X-Men fans like me, you just got to bring the old team back together. Put
Mm-hmm.
put them in all in one book. And hey, you still got Chris Claremont around. That would be
Go
worth
write X-Men
forking.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be worth forking over the extra for Mr. Claremont's idea to write a classic X-Men story. But yeah, you got to put them all together and kind of start from scratch and build from the ashes. It can be done. It's like we keep saying, it's not that people don't like these characters. They love these characters, but it's just the way you're presenting them that is having some trouble and it's making them struggle, you know?
Yeah.
And
No,
X-Men's a book that's famous for, introducing new characters and having additions on the team, and you know, it's a great platform for that. But at least have the original squad back together. That's what we want.
yeah, I think the thing is they've got to do two or three things really. I think, like you said, bring the classic lines back. The X-Men 97 team, that's who everybody wants to see in a comic book. And I know Marvel, I think the editor of the X-Men said, hey, he didn't do that because they're not trying to do, stuff that's been done in the past. They're trying to create new IP. You're not going to create any new IP on 6-issue canceled miniseries that are going to turn into a movie. And when you've tried that in the MCU, those movies have lost you 100 so million dollars. So why don't you put the team back together, tell new stories with that team, and maybe with that X-Men 97 team you can create a new threat, a new villain, a new group that they fight, and that will turn into your next billion-dollar idea or your next video game spin-off, the way the 90s did when they introduced characters like Apocalypse, who came in there and that turned into a huge character. So I think, one, put the classic team, like you said, back together, that X-Men 97 group. I think the other thing is reduce the line to 3 or 4 books. I think, X-Men wants to sell 19, 20 books. The problem is $5 a pop. It's going to be really hard for people to keep up with the whole lineup. They're doing this Age of Revelation crossover. It's 16 tie-in books. Can tell you right now, that alone is going to scare a ton of people, including myself, who normally would be in on an event, from even starting it. Because it's like, nah, man, I'm not going to read one of 16 parts of something that's going on. I think the second part is you got to restore the Brotherhood. You got to give Magneto back to being evil. Juggernaut's got to be evil again. And I know some have gone through character arcs, but not enough to justify them hanging out with the X-Men all the time. It's sort of like if you picked up a Batman comic book and every month he was teamed up with the Joker. And just like the Joker's hanging out in the Batcave like it's nobody's business and like palling around with Jim Gordon and Nightwing. And be like, what the heck is going on? Like
Right.
these are characters in Magneto and Juggernaut and Mystique and these villains who have tried to kill these people repeatedly for years and done all kinds of horrific things to them. You got to make them the evil mutants again. I think the other part, and this is where I would use an X-Men trick that they've done before, um, erase some of the actions of them through time travel. The X-Men do this all the time. Alternate time, whatever cheap, lazy trick you got to do. You can't have Nightcrawler dropping people into the vacuum of space and laughing about it. And then he comes back and he's always Kurt the lovable priest again. You can't do that. So clones, scrolls, Mr. Sinister created these ones that they've
Alternate
been running.
universe,
Alternate
time travel.
universe,
Yeah.
someone goes back in time and the real X-Men were stuck in the Shi'ar world space or so. I don't know. Whatever lazy, lame trick you got to do to put the characters back at a place where we recognize them again. And you can get rid of some of these really weird actions where they were hanging out with Mr. Sinister, like eating ice cream and pretending it was normal when he's a genocidal maniac. Like,
Right.
I think that's the thing is you had to tell me Apocalypse is like kidnapping Cyclops' baby, and they were like palling around and hanging out. We're the X-Men. Like, no, this doesn't work. And so I think you've got to do something to undo the damage of that. I think the last part is, look, they have all these newer characters and all these newer mutants that they have. There's a book for that. It's called The New Mutants. So instead of the X-Men being bogged down with, hey, it's Cyclops and 6 characters you don't care about, let's have them in a normal book where
Yeah.
all your superstars are there. And then you got books like The New Mutants that can be where, hey, Kamala Khan, who apparently has some fans, have that be the book they can show up and buy. Quentin Quire and all these other characters that are newer that people like, supposedly. Put them in a book and let's see if it moves. Let's see if it sells. And if it does well, then you can spin those off and do more. But you shouldn't mess with the lineup of like Wolverine, Jean, Storm, Scott, Beast, Nightcrawler, Collide. That needs to be the core. And they need to also, I think, find superstar writers and artists again. And look, Marvel and DC, the writers and artists have kind of gone down a little bit for sure. They still have talent. You need to pay whoever your best creative is. Get your 2 best artists. If they can't do 6 issues in a row, have the first one do 3, the second do 3, and just keep rotating. But you can't have X-Men look like a book that no one cared about. And I think too often that's the case. But I think that's what we would try to do to get them back on track. I think You got to explain some of these actions and fix it because it's too great of a brand to be in the place that it's in. I think that's the part that's kind of embarrassing with it. And I think you and I, it's funny, we compare a lot of things to sports on here and stuff like that, but there's certain teams and certain franchises that, like, even if you're not a fan, it's embarrassing to see a franchise that used to be so good be a joke. Right. And this is kind of the X-Men being in the position they're in. It's kind of like if you turned on the NFL and the Pittsburgh Steelers were like 1-16 and the worst team in the league with no fans in the stands. Even though I don't like the Steelers very much, it's like, wait a second, that's one of the most celebrated teams of all time. They should not have an empty stadium of booing fans and losing games every year. And that's kind of where the X-Men is like it's a classic franchise that deserves better. It needs to be in a better place. And I think if they can fix X-Men, that's a huge piece also to fixing Marvel Comics. Because if you get that book cranking up again, and
especially before the movie comes out.
yeah, no, and it's the
Especially
perfect
before
time
the
to get them
yeah,
right. The MCU
get it,
is,
get it on a roll. Bring that back
mhm.
that original team. It's a surefire hit.
Yeah,
You'll get X-Men fans coming out of the woodwork to buy books. If you put
especially
the
you put that classic team in their classic costumes on a lineup with a good artist and a good writer. I have a hard time believing that stays on the shelves for very long, especially if it's not a cheap miniseries, it's not a 5 issue thing, it's not a tie-in. It's like, no, this is the start of a new run with all the characters you love. I have a hard time believing that would stay or need to be rebooted every 10 issues. But
that's a winner.
yeah. Let us know. What do you guys think down below? What would you do to fix the X-Men? Do you think the X-Men are broken? Again, if you disagree with us, folks, that is completely okay. If you love where they're at and you think the stories make sense, show us down below. Comment. We're not here to tell you you're stupid or wrong or anything like that. We love seeing the perspective. We don't want this to be an echo chamber where it's all just, hey, you better agree with us or something like that. That's ridiculous. This is all conversation. That's the best thing about comic books is everybody's got different opinions and different views. So we'd love to see yours down below. As always, folks, thank you for watching. God bless you. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.